Hello, my lovelies. It is time for another round of Yeet or Keep, so stay tuned. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. Yeet or Keep is sort of a try a chapter type thing where I try a chapter or two, depending on how many pages it is. And then I decide if this is something that I'm actually interested in and I'll keep it, or if I'm really not all that interested and it can go. So as you can see, I have a lot of empty shelves in my house right now because we're in the middle of moving. So I have very few books left unpacked. So the ones that I did choose from are actually from my These Books Will Self-Destruct shelf. This will probably be the last time I do it from These Books Will Self-Destruct the way it is right now anyway. But this is what I have selected. So I have 50 Shades Darker, which I have not read 50 Shades of Grey. So I looked and I was able to get that on Libby. So I'm going to try that, see if I'm interested. If I am, then this can be a keep. If I'm not, that can be a yeet. Next, I have Untamed, which this is actually book like 3.5 of the Splintered series by A.G. Howard. And I can't remember if I completely read the first book or if I just DNF'd it. I know I read a good bit of it. And I think it was kind of a soft DNF at the time, but I haven't been interested enough to re-pick it back up because I wasn't having that great of a time when I did read it. It is available like through Audible Prime, so I don't have to like use a credit or anything for it. So I'm going to kind of revisit Splintered and see if that's something that I do want to try to continue with or let the whole series go. Next we have Once Again by Liz Braswell and Cameron Doke. This is actually 2 books in one. We have Snow and Beauty Sleep. I don't think I'm going to try a chapter of each. I'm just going to try a chapter of the first one and see how it goes. Let's see. So it looks like Snow goes to page 268. Beauty Sleep starts shortly after that. And it's also short, but it looks like Beauty Sleep is actually by Cameron Doke and Snow is by Liz Braswell. So should I try a chapter of both? I think if I try a chapter of the first one and I'm not feeling it, then I will try a chapter of Beauty Sleep and see how I'm feeling about that. If I'm not feeling it for either one, then I'll yeet it. But if I'm feeling it for at least one, then I'll keep it. Then we have Once Upon a Dream, A Twisted Tale by Liz Braswell. This book is heavy for some reason. It's not because it's a huge amount of pages. Well, it is like 440 pages, but it just, I don't know, it's dense. And this is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. And then we have The Gallery by Laura Marks Fitzgerald. And I don't really know too much about this one. I've had it for a very, 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 very long time. So these are the books that I'm going to attempt for this round of Eat or Keep and see how I feel. And I will come back and let you know. Let's see, which one should I start with? I think I might start with most controversial, and that is this one, 50 Shades of Grey. I'll give it a chapter or two. I don't know how long that will take, just to kind of see how I'm feeling about it. And I'll come back and let you know. So that was an easy one. Halfway through chapter 1, I was like, I did go ahead and finish chapter 1, but the writing is so cheesy. I just can't. Now, I could see maybe watching the movie, but I'm yeeting this. I don't need to read the first book. I don't need to read this. This one is definitely a yeet. Okay, I think now I'm going to work on, it's on top here, the gallery. Let's see, this says, something is afoot in the Sewell mansion. 12-year-old Martha, the new kitchen maid, is going to find out what it is. Millionaire heiress Rose Sewell was once the talk of the town, but no one has heard from her in ages. She hasn't left her room in years. Her newspaper magnate husband has a staff to tend to his eccentric wife, so he can instead focus on tending to his riches. Alphonse, the footman, knows a great deal more than he'll admit. Martha's ma, the head of household staff, oversees everything, but is blind to the most obvious, devastating deception of all. At the center of this house, filled with secrets, sits the gallery, which just might hold the key to revealing what everyone is hiding. Inspired by real-life events and set in the roaring 20s, Laura Marks Fitzgerald spins a tale of mystery and intrigue, where no one is who they say, nothing is what it seems, and the answers are concealed in plain sight, if only you know how to look for them. Okay. And I guess this is middle grade? I was totally thinking this was going to be YA. I mean, I'm guessing it's middle grade because it looks like the main character's 12. I am intrigued though. So let's see how long the first chapter is. Oh, it's definitely middle grade. The text is also quite large. Okay, it looks like chapter 1 is only 8 pages, so I might read the first couple of chapters. Let's see. Chapter 2 ends on page 20, so maybe I'll read the first 2 chapters. And it looks like we've got multiple timelines because chapter 1 is in 2016 and chapter 2 is in 1928. And it also looks like there's like news articles and stuff. So, okay, I'll be back. Okay, so the first chapter is, like I said, in 2016, and Martha is 100 years old. She's just turned 100 years old, and this woman from the newspaper has come to interview her for this little story, and Martha's not really able to tell her much. For one, she can't speak. She had her, I think she had her larynx removed. Oh, sorry, she had her voice box removed. Cancer of the larynx, and said don't smoke, kids. And the woman gives her a pad to write her answers on, and Martha just kind of holds up her arthritic hands and shrugs. And the news lady, she brings out this article where Martha's mentioned from like 87 years ago, and was like, is this you? And because Martha didn't feel like talking to her, she just pretended to go to sleep. And the woman just kind of had to make up a little article. But then we go to chapter 2, and it's 1923. And this is when Martha is 12. And she has just gotten into trouble at school. And for asking very valid questions, but it's like a Catholic school that they don't want you to ask these kind of questions. And she got expelled, and she's expelled only for a year, and during this time she has to go to work with her mom, and her mom's like the head housemaid to the Sewells, and Martha is going to go and be a maid there during this year and work as sort of a punishment. And we get a little bit of the story of the Sewells, or at least Miss Sewell. And I don't know, I'm intrigued. I'm interested. So this one is going to be a keep. I think it'll be a quick read too when I read it. Okay, I think the next one I want to do is Splintered. Because, well, no, I feel like I should put something before and after, like one of these before and after, because we do have all these retellings. So maybe I'll go with, well, this is also a retelling. It's an Alice in Wonderland retelling. I think I'm going to go with Once Upon a Dream, A Twisted Tale. And let's see, this says, what if Sleeping Beauty never woke up? It should be simple: a dragon defeated, a slumbering princess in a castle, a prince poised to wake her. But when the prince falls asleep, as soon as his lips touch the fair maidens, it is clear that this fairy tale is far from over. With the desperate fairy's last curse controlling her mind, Princess Aurora must escape from a different castle of thorns and navigate a dangerously magical landscape created from her own very own dreams. Aurora isn't alone. A charming prince is eager to join her quest, and old friends offer their help. But as Maleficent's agents follow her every move, Aurora must discover who her true allies are, and moreover, who she truly is. Time is running out. Will the Sleeping Beauty be able to wake herself up? I am definitely intrigued by this one. I love a good retelling, so I'm hoping that I'm hooked right away with this one. Let's see. There is like a little something here in the beginning. The first chapter is called Consider the Dragon. Let's see how long it is. Okay, that ends on page 5, so we'll continue past that. Chapter 2 is Happily Ever After Redacted. That goes to page 13. So we'll see about if I stop there or if I read the next chapter, which is Status Quo. Let's see, that goes to page 24. So yeah, I'll read the first 2, maybe 3 chapters of this, and I'll come back and let you know my thoughts. Okay, so I read the first 3 chapters of Once Upon a Dream, and I'm curious what's going on. So in the first chapter, Consider the Dragon, the prince makes his way up and kisses Aurora, and then he falls asleep. And it's kind of funny, like that chapter is kind of funny because he's like kind of hung up on is the dragon actually dead? And then in Happily Ever After Redacted, we see that it's very much a different story than the Sleeping Beauty that we all know. So in this one, the king and queen, they were hoping for a son, but they did get this beautiful princess, and they're happy about that. But they're also like very greedy and envious of the neighboring kingdoms, and they want what's there, but they don't have an army or anything like that. And so they make a deal with 3 evil fairies, and invite like all of the different kingdoms and all of these different people to celebrate the naming of the princess, and for them to all bestow gifts on her. And these 3 evil fairies are going to get to bestow gifts as well. But the reasoning for these 3 evil fairies being invited is because they made a deal, like the king and the queen made a deal with them, that on Aurora's 16th birthday, they would give them to her. Like they would give her to the evil fairies for being able to use magic and all of this other stuff to claim the things that they want. And through these 16 years, they're like ruining the world pretty much. And there's one fairy that shows up that's not an evil fairy. She's like a good fairy, and that's Maleficent. And Maleficent's like, how can you sell your child? And this is wrong, and all of this stuff. But then 16 years go by, and the world's like destroyed pretty much because the king and queen are so greedy. And Aurora is kind of neglected and all of that. And then the time comes and the 3 evil fairies come back, and they're like ready to collect. And Maleficent comes back and like stops it and puts the king and queen in the dungeon and kind of destroys the evil fairies and encases the castle in like vines and thorns, and everybody's like stuck there and going to remain there while the world heals itself. And then Status Quo is just kind of what's going on in the day-to-day with inside the kingdom. And Aurora like went once down to see her parents and has never gone back. She kind of avoids anything about the dungeon, and Maleficent's known as like the savior of the kingdom or the savior of the land or whatever, and kind of has taken Aurora in as adopted daughter. And then there's this, at the end of that chapter, there's this minstrel who says he escaped and it's out there, and he gives Aurora this blue feather. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm definitely intrigued. So this one is going to be a keep. Okay, so now I think I'm going to retry my hand at Splintered and see what I think about this. This one is an Alice in Wonderland retelling. Let's see. So this says, this stunning debut captures the grotesque madness of Underland, as well as a girl's pangs of first love and independence. Alyssa Gardner hears the whispers of bugs and flowers, precisely the affliction that landed her mother in a mental hospital years before. This family curse stretches back to her ancestor, Alice Little, the real-life inspiration for Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Alyssa might be crazy, but she manages to keep it together, for now. When her mother's mental health takes a turn for the worse, Alyssa learns that what she thought was a fiction is based in terrifying reality. The real Wonderland is a place far darker and more twisted than Lewis Carroll ever let on. There, Alyssa must pass a series of tests, including draining an ocean of Alice's tears, waking the slumbering tea party, and subduing a vicious Bandersnatch. To fix Alice's mistakes and save her family, she must also decide whom to trust. Jeb, her gorgeous best friend and secret crush, or the sexy but suspicious Morpheus, her guide through Wonderland, who may have dark motives of his own. I remember not necessarily liking how dark it was. That's all I can remember. This was years and years ago when I read that. So that's what I'm going to go with now and see if I do want to still hold on to this series or eat it. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I just listened to the first 2 chapters of Splintered, and I don't know. I'm more interested this time around than I was, I guess, the first time. I can't recall exactly what it was that put me off. Maybe it's something that's later on in the book. It does discuss a lot of mental health in Splintered because our main character, Alyssa, she believes that she's schizophrenic. Her mother is currently in an asylum. Her mother's mother offed herself not long after giving birth to Alyssa's mom, Allison. And they believe this is just like, a genetic mental illness problem. But I think it's, they're not actually mentally ill, that they're getting word from Wonderland by these bugs and flowers. I'm still interested enough to hold on to these, and I think I would be more interested in continuing it again in the future. So I am going to keep this. Okay, so the last thing I have is, once again, by Liz Braswell and Cameron Doki. As I said, this is 2 books in one. So Snow is the one I'm going to read the first little bit of. This says, after the tragic death of her mother, Jessica's father finds love again. But as Jessica soon grows into a beautiful young woman, it becomes clear that her stepmother is wildly and murderously jealous of her. With no choice, Jessica escapes to London and falls in with an odd band of outcasts who accept her into their makeshift family. So when her stepmother, repentant and seeking forgiveness, appears in the city, Jessica must decide whom to trust with her life. So let's see. How long is the first chapter? Now, again, for this one, if I don't find I'm that interested in Snow, I will try Beauty Sleep. But if I'm at least interested in Snow, then I'll keep the book. So there is a prologue. It's just like the front and back of one page and like half of another. And then chapter 1 starts on page 11. And it goes to page 20. Let's see. I might read chapter 1 and chapter 2, just because chapter 2 ends on page 30. but chapter 1 doesn't really start until page 12, so it's still about the 20-page mark. So I'm going to give this a read and I'll be back. Okay, so I read the prologue and the first 2 chapters of Snow, and I didn't really have any feelings one way or the other. Like, I wasn't really intrigued, but I wasn't like disliking it, and I wasn't really bored either. It just hadn't really gotten to anything that grabbed my attention, but I didn't feel that I was ready to like just get rid of it. So I did read the next little bit, which was an interlude. I just got to chapter 3. I'm using a rubber band as my bookmark right now. The interlude had an interesting little thing in it. So, okay, in the prologue, we see Jessica leaving the castle and like escaping. And a boy named Alan, the servant, is helping her. And then we go to chapter 1, and it's talking about like when Jessica was born and all that, or actually before she was born. And the Dutch and Duchess, they wanted desperately to have a child, to have an heir, and the whole city was like anxious for this because the Dutch and Duchess, they pretty much hired most of the people in this village or town or whatever, and they relied on them. So everybody was worried that, you know, if they didn't have an heir, who this would go to. And, oh, sorry, baby. Eventually, one day, the Duchess was pregnant, and the Dutch, or not Dutch, the Duke, I'm saying Dutch and Duchess, the Duke and Duchess, eventually, she got pregnant. The Duke was very much hoping for a boy, for an heir, because a girl couldn't inherit until she got married and her husband could inherit it, or if he wasn't like high enough nobility, then her son could eventually inherit it. So he was hoping for a boy. The Duchess, she really didn't care either way. But as she was born, they had a little girl, Jessica. And as Jessica was taking her first breaths, the Duchess was taking her last, and she passed away. And the Duke was not, like, he was just devastated, and he kind of blamed Jessica and was resentful of her, but not just because his wife died, but also he didn't even have an heir. So over the years, he was very distant, and she was pretty much raised by like the servants and everything. And then he realized that, okay, I'm going to have to do something because it's going to be a long time before Jessica's old enough to be married or to have a child of her own. I need to find a new wife. And eventually he did. And her name is Anne. And Anne comes to the castle. They're quickly married. And Jessica is kind of uncertain how she feels about Anne. She thinks Anne is absolutely beautiful and seems very kind. And she's kind of excited, but also nervous about her. And then, as a wedding gift, the Duke gives Anne this boy named Alan, who is a fiddler. And it's, you know, he can play her music and whatever. And she's like, okay, where did it say? She said, "We are not as rich as you might think, boy. I have not married into endless money. We must economize. There is no room for people who would just play the fiddle. You will also help me with some personal tasks. Nothing too onerous or unbefitting an artist. In return, I will act as your patron, buy you music, bring you to concerts, make introductions for you, and the like. Are you willing?" And he said, "Yes, my lady." And apparently he's just a few years older, like 14 or 15, a few years older than Jessica is at the time. I think Jessica's like 10 years old or something at this point. And in the interlude, and this is what kind of interested me, Anne instructs him to follow her to her room, and he does. And when they go into her room, there's this big gilded mirror, and she's looking at it and says something about staying young and beautiful is a full-time job. Be glad you're not a woman fiddler. And he cleared his throat respectfully and said, being kind and wise is a full-time job for anyone, my lady. You are clearly beautiful, but I am sure people notice more than that. She said, you're full of wisdom, fiddler. I do not think I like that. And so she had him pick up the mirror and hold it so she could see herself better. And then she goes to her chest and gets this necklace and goes and puts it on him and says it's a gift. But now with this necklace, she says that from now on, she said, smoothing her hair and admiring her reflection, you will speak to me only when I wish an answer, and you will find yourself unable to tell anyone about what we discuss or do. And then he goes to say something like some flattery and is unable to say anything. And she just smiled and said, good. Now, for instance, if I ask something like, Mirror Boy, of all you've seen thus far, who in this remote land is the most beautiful woman? You would say, and then he was able to speak and said that she was. So I'm interested with this necklace and what evil doings she has planned, I guess. I'm interested at that, like that interlude got me. But yeah, so I think this one's going to be a keep as well. I do love a good retelling. So this was actually a surprise. Usually it's pretty evenly split on, I think, my yeets and my keeps. But this time I had 4 keeps, which, I mean, 3 of them are retellings. I'm not really that surprised. And then 1 yeet. This kind of wasn't much of a surprise either, because I know I've heard a lot of bad things about that series. I am kind of curious enough to watch the movie, at least the beginning of it, but as far as the writing, I could definitely do without. Have you guys read any of these books? Did you like them? Did you not? Comment down below and let me know. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. And until next time, remember to always be completely you. Bye!